Well, Prime Minister Buseni on the PUP government. I'm not here to draw any conclusions about Prime Minister Buseni, for that would be to write him off. When, as long as he remains in office, he and his government, they are unable to become the very best, they are able to become the very best version of themselves, which I hope is forthcoming. I don't have any expectations from government, so I never get disappointed. For I am a realist. I take what's there through a plain mirror, seeing with clarity. And I have to say that it is disheartening because policymakers are the ones able to promise and deliver on hope. For example, hope of having a pleasant and robust economic environment, hope that they, calling themselves honorable, will truly be persons of integrity. For when voters see that they are persons of integrity, is when they'll continue to give them their trust. Both conflict and corruption are born within individuals. Conflict, when the individual fails to resolve conflict within him or herself, that's when she takes it outside. Hence the reason individuals need to do inner engineering, which is how they enjoy pleasantness within themselves. For people are chemical factories. They create all emotions from within themselves. Emotions don't come from the outside environment. When you create pleasantness in your mind is how you experience peacefulness within yourself, and in putting it into a higher gear is how you experience joyfulness. So in putting in creating pleasantness in emotion produces love, and you go higher, you become compassionate. Pleasantness in the body produces good health, and when you increase it, you're pleasure filled. And when you create pleasantness in your energy system, you become blissful and ecstatic. So then the corruption, when people are governed through their bodies and minds, as opposed to being devotees to spirituality, they are material minded. And in so being, irrespective of their wealth, they never think they have enough. In which regard, there's no difference between Michael Ashcroft as well the Brisenius and ministers in cabinet and many other Belizeans who don't think they have enough, and those in opposition as well. So these same Belizeans who don't think they have enough and thereby refuse to share even a bottle of water with their neighbors, for them to be there thinking that Michael Ashcroft, the Brisenius, and the opposition members in the House should share their millions with them, should think again. People, like all other creatures, are born with survival instincts. So they, like the other creatures, also come equipped with the boundary setting reptilian brain, which keep yelling, I, mine, like a dog peeing on every light post as it goes around establishing its P kingdom. However, given the evolution and the addition of the cerebral cortex and intellect, human beings are supposed to elevate beyond being in survival mode and, with education and experience, propel themselves into career ambition mode, and from there becoming visionaries. Being ambitious is not a bad thing, for to yearn for fulfillment is never ending for a human being because she has no ceiling. able to become whatever he or she wants to be. Therefore, fulfillment for the human being means to live a full fledged life. Other creatures have no choice but to become full fledged according to their own kind and species. Human beings should want the same thing for themselves, like other creatures, to become full fledged human beings. A vision is just an expanded ambition. Ambition is taking care of your own needs, and a vision is wanting for everyone else the same thing you want for yourself. Well being. So, a human being that remains in survival mode is compulsive in thought and behavior. However, in elevating beyond that, she begins to make decisions and choices consciously as opposed to compulsively. To go from compulsive to conscious behavior requires spiritual transformation. For compulsive thought and behavior are material in nature, they are physical, driven through the body and mind. Since a human being has both a physical and a spirit nature being at the core, to become fully conscious, she has to begin governing him or herself through his or her spirit. As I've explained time and time again, spiritual transformation is not a dripping process. It does not happen in installments. It can only happen through an explosion. The person undergoing an explosion, going from the rigid state where one says I was born this way, to liquid flexible where the individual is no longer says, I'm no longer like this, or I'm no longer that like that, stop talking that way, to vapor, like two children blowing bubbles. And one says this is my bubble, that's and the other says that's my bubble. And but when once a bubble bursts, they're both breathing the same air. You can't distinguish. And from the vapor, to the realm of nothingness, which is the realm of the spirit. So a person is not ready to become transformed until she reaches the point in his or her life wherein she says, in other words, I have tried without success to become fulfilled through my body and mind. I have everything, know everything, been everywhere, but I'm still unfulfilled. At which point then she is prepared to abandon the material governance system in favor of spirit governance, where you're like a vehicle on four wheels governing by your spirit, and your body and energy system as your two back wheels, which are relatively stable and are already going in life's direction. Your thought and emotion at the front, which you constantly have to bring into alignment. But all four wheels then be going in the same one at the same direction. you know so the person has to be ready to abandon, in the material governance system in favor of the spirit governance, and dispossess identifications as well as attachments, putting a safe distance from the whole shebang. So when making decisions, making choices among things of a physical nature, she always goes broad, universal, instead of creating one more barrier, one more fence, one more boundary. For a person who only, for example, only tolerates his or her wife. I mean, that how long will that last? It'll before it ends in divorce. So and then you create, look, if a wall of protection, a wall of protection eventually becomes a wall of imprisonment. So the standard that you want, right, is universal, one standard, right? So it has to be acceptance, not tolerance. That's the universal standard. Acceptance. Accept people the way they are, just the way they are, regardless. So you don't create two beliefs. You don't create a north and south side. You have one standard, universal for everyone. That's the way it ought to be. in a country that has one constitution, where it says equal rights for all, regardless of creed, ethnicity, color, um, creed meaning religion, regardless of gender, but we're still discriminating. We're still a country that discriminates. So that's a major problem that even going into our 45th year of independence, we don't we haven't fleshed out the Constitution. Instead, we've digressed, gone to where now um, we we the rift is growing between those who have and those who don't, and the those who claim to be parliamentarians and want to serve the people's interest, instead of doing so, they're self-helping, enriching themselves instead of enriching the whole. So it's a sad situation that we're in. Um, so once again, you know, when making decisions and choices among things of a physical nature, a person who is transformed always goes universal instead of creating boundaries. For God is one who is impartial, and the universe is one energy. So the spirit in the spirit realm, it's boundless. Only therein persons are able to grow and expand without limitation. A person who is transformed, being a devotee to spirituality, recognizes that God, who is a spirit being, is one, and one who's impartial, does not discriminate. By the same token, the universe is one energy, so individuals can only claim to have their own bodies and minds, but not their own lives. For life is a shared commodity, shared with all other living creatures and things. So a devotee to spirituality will not say things like, I am free to do as I please. For that's not exercising freedom. What that is compulsive thought and behavior. A devotee to spirituality uses his or her freedom to make conscious choices. In a nutshell, choosing to do that which is right for him or herself as well as prudent for the whole. So that person says something like, look, I am free, to do that which is right, not only for me, but for everyone else. So a devotee to spirituality keeps his or her humanity lit. And in so doing, that person remains a person of integrity and not there trying to be one up on everyone else. That will be all.